Railbookers is an award-winning tour operator specializing in independent rail vacations all over the world. Destinations such as Italy and Switzerland, where you can travel on the high-speed trains or some of those iconic trains, visiting some of the great cities, majestic snow-capped mountains, not to mention the delicious cuisine. Whether it's Europe, Canada, Alaska, Australia, New Zealand, South America, South Africa, India, and more, so many great options. Railbookers has you covered. Contact your local AAA travel advisor today to book your next Railbookers vacation.
Picture yourself boarding a train from a cosmopolitan European city. Roller bag in tow, you settle into your roomy seat next to a big picture window. And as the train slowly leaves the station, you let a giddy smile loose. You just can't help but get swept up by the romance of it all.
We took the train via Luxembourg and we picked up a night train going down through France and through Switzerland to Italy. And I remember waking up somewhere north of Florence. I still really treasure this feeling when you put the blinds up on your train in the morning and you're just somewhere. The architecture looks different, the towns are different. It's a bit of a magical feeling.
You've just heard my guest today, Tom Hall, sharing his first train travel experience as a teenager. And it was love at first track. Tom has since become an expert in traveling Europe by train, and he's a regular contributor to Lonely Planet. Today, he shares his tips and tricks for capturing the beauty of the journey while on your way to your European summer destinations. Well, hello, Tom. I cannot wait to talk about Europe with you.
Thanks for having me, Angie. I'm really nice to be here.
There's so much about, I think, train travel that as Americans, we kind of miss out on because we don't have so many rail journeys. What is so great about train travel in Europe?
I think the first thing to bear in mind when you're thinking about traveling in Europe is just how normal taking the train is, even over really quite long distances. It's not just common, it's in many cases the default way of going places. And there's some really interesting reasons for that. If you take, for example, a route like Madrid to Barcelona. 30 years ago, Madrid to Barcelona in Spain was one of the world's busiest air corridors. It was a New York, Boston, or pick your example of two very popular US cities. But the construction of a high-speed route between those two cities by train cut travel time from 7 hours to around about 3 hours. And that's city centre to city centre. And what that meant is that people have largely stopped flying that route. They tend to take the train. And there's competition on that route. There's different companies, there's different classes of service, there's different types of carriages. So taking the train is a very day-to-day thing. But it's also a really awesome thing. Because not only do trains go pretty much everywhere, but when you're on the ground, you're getting to see so much more of this beautiful continent. And they're really the key to, I think, unlocking, seeing a lot of it in a short space of time, affordably as well.
When you're on the ground, you're actually seeing more. You're not just in transit, you're actually still doing, still seeing, still experiencing, right?
Completely. And one of the things that visitors will notice very quickly is that in a lot of European countries, trains are double-deckers, and even very fast intercity trains are double-deckers. If you get a seat upstairs on a French TGV, you're going to have this great view for hours and hours as the train is really whizzing along. And it's an experience in itself. In fact, there are other trains which are purposefully built with large panoramic windows. I know that's present on some Amtrak trains as well. But they're very, very widespread on European trains. So yes, you are traveling at ground level, you're seeing what's there, and you're also meeting people. It's not just tourists who are using trains in Europe. Everyone is using them to visit family. They're using them for work. You never know who you're going to end up sitting next to. And increasingly, they're also a way to sleep to your destination, because we are in this moment where European night trains are having a real rejuvenation, a real renaissance, and we have really quite impressive rooms that people can sleep in, and you can snooze your way from one place to another, save on the cost of a night's hotel, or just enjoy that experience for what it is.
So I imagine pre-booking train travel is very important, especially if you do plan on saving a hotel night in favor of a sleeper train. Europe gets so busy in the summer months.
It is worth thinking about for certain key routes, making reservations, certainly booking as early in advance as you can in order to get the best choice of fare, be able to travel on the train you want to, be able to travel in the class that you want to, and get the most flexible ticket. All of that tends to work like airline pricing. In some places, however, you will be able to travel and really feel quite free. There are some countries, Switzerland being a great example of this, where you can turn up, buy a ticket, pretty much any train, don't need to worry about reservations. There's loads of trains per day, and they will all be running efficiently and smoothly and on time. And in others is somewhere in the middle. We are still in a continent where you can occasionally find strikes or some sort of service disruptions on key routes. So doing a little bit of homework on that is also very helpful.
One major benefit of these European rail vacations is ease. It's just a little bit easier. It's a little bit less stressful, maybe a lot less stressful than airport travel. And you don't have to go through border checks every time you cross into a new country. What else can people do to make their trips easier on trains?
I would say looking into whether you're going to need or get value from a rail pass or not. So rail passes, I think, particularly for younger travelers, have in the past been seen as like the default way to go. Now, actually, at the moment, it's almost certain, and I say that with a heavy heart because I do love rail passes and the idea behind them, but in most cases, it will be better value for you to book your point-to-point journeys in advance and then you've got them booked. The only reason you wouldn't want to do that is if you want a completely flexible itinerary. But given that we're in a world where I think a lot of us, myself included, feel a bit happier if we've booked our accommodation, we know where we're going to be at the end of that night, we're prepared to trade maybe some of that feeling of freedom for some of that sense of security when we're traveling, especially when we know it's going to be busy, booking these point-to-point tickets, that's worth it.
What is the best way for people to book if they're wanting to go to different countries?
It's probably worth doing two things at the start. One is having a look on a site like thetrainline.com, and that's very good for international journeys and actually European domestic travel too. So that's a good place to start. Cross-reference that with information that you get on the individual country's website and compare. Not all tickets are always available on both, so it's good to have a look at those too. The other thing is register and download for the apps of each country's rail company. That will also be of help to you in terms of storing your ticket on your phone. A lot of tickets now they're digital, and you'll need to keep your phone with you topped up. So you need a power bank as well, though most European trains have USB connections at seats, which is really helpful. There's one exception actually. In Italy, there's a great app which is called Trenit, Trenit, and Trenit is actually not owned by any of the train operators. It's a separate app, but it will show you the best route and it will help you to book them. And it gives you the times and it shows you as the trains are moving. So having a good arsenal of apps, I think, is really, really helpful when you're both booking trains and moving around.
Load up on those apps before you go. So that's a great tip. How far in advance can you start booking?
Tickets tend to go on sale between 90 to 180 days. So between 3 to 6 months in advance. Now, the thing that's really interesting about this summer is I can already tell how busy it's going to be because quite a few trains that I've tried to book myself on, I haven't been able to. And that's particularly true of night trains. The good news is that if you can't make those journeys work, it's not the end of the world because in a lot of cases, those trains are running along routes that you can travel faster during the day.
For somebody who's never been on an overnight train, what should they expect as far as food, bathrooms, showers? Like, is this a hotel kind of situation? Is this more of a hostel, like bare bones situation? What do people need to expect?
It varies hugely depending on which route you go and who the providers are. So Nightjet running from somewhere like Paris through to Vienna On board, there's a choice of accommodation. You can just go and sit in a seat all night. And honestly, that's just not a good idea. Like, you're not gonna get much sleep. You're gonna be cranky, you're gonna be crabby, and end up tired. Probably have an argument with your partner if you're traveling with them, and no, don't do that. The next step up from that is what you'd call a couchette. A couchette normally has 6 bunks in a compartment. If you book yourself in there, you will be sharing with other travelers. So that's a bit like being in a hostel or something like that. And actually, it works fine. But I can also understand why it's not everyone's cup of tea, and particularly the sharing with people that you don't know. Just to bear in mind that when it comes to travel by train in Europe, that is a very well-established way to travel. The next step up from that, similar setup, more comfortable, 4-person sleeper. Now, this is where it gets a bit exciting, because if you can go even a step beyond that, there are options too. Book out that whole sleeper for you and your traveling companions multiple. So you could have a bit of privacy there, and that's great, isn't it? On modern night jet trains, there are 2 additional classes. On the Hamburg to Vienna route, for example, these little capsules, they're a bit like, I don't know if people have seen sort of Japanese capsule hotels, but they have those available. And that obviously gives you the budget category of being in a couchette or a sleeper, but you get your own space. Now, it's not enormous, it's a capsule, but you get your own space. The other thing that's available is the highest class is a private room, which in some cases comes with a shower, essentially your own hotel room on the rails. That's going to cost a bit of money. It's probably comparable to staying in a nice hotel for the night. What an experience to have.
So if you do take an overnight route, splashing out a bit makes more sense, especially knowing you're already saving on a hotel room and transportation to and from the station to a hotel. This is where you might want to splurge a bit.
Be prepared to just spend that little bit more, because it does make a difference in terms of privacy, in terms of space, in terms of facilities. If you spend more, you tend to get food, maybe breakfast, though that differs from different companies. And in terms of showers, if you haven't lucked out and got one of those premium cabins, you're almost certainly looking at having a shower when you arrive. So try to organise an early check-in at your hotel. I think otherwise you might be feeling a bit grubby as you go. But it is an amazing It's an amazing experience.
And how's the food? Are we talking about airplane food? Or are we talking about something better?
It's either something better or it's something worse. You kind of tend to go to 2 extremes. An exception to that is there is a night train that runs from London up to Scotland, and it's called the Caledonian Sleeper, and it has its own lounge car. And in that lounge car, you can get the most fantastic plate of haggis and great selection of whiskies. And people absolutely love this place. It's like a sort of social club. And in the morning, a cooked breakfast will be brought to you in your compartment. So food on that train is great. Increasingly, railway companies are trying to differentiate by the food that they're offering. So high-speed services, we were talking about them in Spain. A lot of the services are run by the national operator Renfe, RENFE, but there's a competitor on some lines, particularly Madrid, Barcelona, which is called Iryo, I-R-Y-O. Excuse my Spanish pronunciation, I'm sure it's much better sounding than that. They offer a full menu which includes various tapas dishes, great Spanish wines, local beers, and they really put a lot of effort and emphasis into the food that they're offering on board. And just one other example that I always absolutely love is by far the best coffee that you will find anywhere on a train is served in Italy. So you go and get your espresso, and they've got the full-on espresso machine behind the counter of this train. This is not some push-button automated looking thing. It's the full steaming Gaggia machine, and it's operated by some old dude who, makes the most fantastic coffee, and that in itself is worth traveling on a Freccia Rossa high-speed train for.
That's something to put on the list for sure. Don't miss the espresso on the Italian trains. I like that. And now for a AAA Travel Minute. Protecting your personal data, presented by Railbookers. We're used to protecting our physical belongings while vacationing, but savvy travelers protect their passwords, email, and digital identities too. Safeguarding your personal data starts before you even take off, according to the Center for Internet Security. Update the operating systems on all your devices to take advantage of the latest security patches. Disable settings that automatically connect your devices to open Wi-Fi networks. And be sure to back up important files and photos. While traveling, remember that your personal data is most vulnerable when your laptop connects to open Wi-Fi networks. You'll often find those in hotel lobbies, airport terminals, and at major tourist destinations. In those cases, avoid checking bank balances, making online purchases, and completing other sensitive transactions. Choosing a cell plan that includes data coverage overseas can help avoid some of these pitfalls. Many carriers offer temporary upgrades for traveling customers. A few simple steps can ensure your data is as safe on vacation as your phone or pocketbook. This has been a AAA Travel Minute. Are there some countries that are known for more high-level rail experiences?
The Czech Republic has absolutely fantastic trains. If you took the train from Prague, beautiful city of Prague, to Berlin in Germany, that's a 4-hour journey. It goes out along the Elbe River, the Vlatva and then the Elbe, goes through Dresden, and it is just really lovely train, beautiful views, very punctual service, and obviously connecting up 2 great destinations. So it gives you a chance to have a sort of multi-city experience, and not an expensive train either. The other thing to say about that train is some of the best food that you will find. A full menu of meals serving dumplings and goulash and stews, and just amazing, absolutely amazing array of stuff. One of the things that marks Switzerland out as being unique is it has quite a number of scenic trains. You go across regular passenger routes, but they offer sort of big panoramic windows. They would do very high standards of food at your seat. Their services like the Bernina Express, the Glacier Express. And there's also a train that goes up the Jungfrau mountain in Switzerland. It's a real once-in-a-lifetime journey. The train just goes up through the middle of the mountain to the top of a glacier. Real kind of James Bond scenery at the top of this observation tower. And very much worth building some of those trains into your plans.
You can see things from trains that you might not be able to see from the road, or you might not be able to get to. So are there any specific spots you remember seeing from a train that you wouldn't have been able to see otherwise?
Coastlines always somehow seem special when they're viewed from a train. The route that goes from Marseille in the south of France to Nice just it sort of wends its way along the coast. It's a wonderful contrasting journey if you've come all the way from Paris, because you kind of go Paris to Marseille down this high-speed line that's going at 180 miles an hour, absolutely hurtles down these 500 miles between Paris and Marseille, and then just slows right down as it goes along the Mediterranean coast, and you get these views of rocky coves and people sitting on beaches and these lovely hotels and these nice yachts sitting in harbours and the sunshine on the water. That's absolutely lovely. Just over the border between France and Italy, the Cinque Terre Railway, which connects up the towns of the Cinque Terre, is also a great way to travel between those places. We're talking about a busy part of Europe here. It can be very, very busy getting on these trains, but if you are on them, and I'd say do it early in the day or late in the evening, that is another really exceptional experience. And I think both of them to an extent, because it's where cars don't go. They would be two that would really stick in my mind. The train I was talking about, the Caledonian Sleeper, its final approach to Fort William goes across one of the remotest places in Europe called Rannoch Moor, which is just a huge open area of open moorland, very wild. It's stuffed full of deer and wildlife and boggy stuff. But there's no roads in there. But there is this railway, and it arrives at this station, Carreur Station. And if you get off there, the train leaves, and you just feel like you're the only person in the universe who's been left at this station. It's like, oh right, I better go for a bit of a walk.
If somebody has, let's say, 8 to 10 days, and they want to see a good bit of Europe, try different foods, and see different landscapes, what kind of route would you recommend for them?
I would probably within that time be saying like 4 to 5 destinations max. making sure that you do just have the time in between to appreciate them. Where do you start? You start in Paris. It's a really busy summer in Paris, so you're probably going to end up actually maybe struggling to find accommodation because it's Olympics time. So maybe you just arrive in the morning and then let's skedaddle in the evening. I would then send us off to Amsterdam. So Paris to Amsterdam is around about a 4-hour journey by train. And it takes you via Lille and Brussels. And you'll arrive in what feels like really quite a different place. The Netherlands is very small. And if you want to, you could take a half-day trip out of there to somewhere like Haarlem or Delft, or even Rotterdam, which is a more modern city, get a view of that. Then I would be going from Amsterdam to Zurich in Switzerland on the night train. You'll arrive in Switzerland at the base of Lake Zurich and at the foot of the Alps. You can travel from there as quickly or as slowly as you like into northern Italy. I would probably pause at one of the lakes, either on the Swiss side or the Italian side, possibly Lake Lugano, Lake Locarno, or Lake Como in Italy. Then from there, you're onto the Italian high-speed network, which is just fantastic. Milan to Rome is about 3.5, 4 hours. There you are in Rome. It's up to you whether you want to keep going on from there, maybe get down to somewhere like Sicily, or you could reverse back up, go over the Brenner Pass into Austria and find yourself in Salzburg or Vienna for the last part of your journey. I think that would be a good use of 8 to 10 days and maybe not too much.
Just the idea of not having to go to an airport every single time you want to change destinations. It's just so much easier.
And if I could just add as an additional benefit, if you arrive in Zurich straight off the night train from Amsterdam and it's a nice warm day, a 10-minute walk from the station, you can be on the banks of the Limmat River, and the good people of Zurich seem to spend all their time in summer jumping in and out of this fast-flowing, clean water and just swimming around. And it's probably my favourite place in the universe, I think, on a summer's day.
That's a good hot tip. Let's talk about the reliability of train travel. Is it pretty much on time and convenient? And what happens if it isn't?
There are some places where trains always seem to run on time. It's highly unusual you encounter a delay in Switzerland or Austria. Germany has a great network of high-speed trains, but everything does get glued up sometimes. So you do need to factor in some time, especially if you're making connections for delays. Night trains, where trains are moving around the continent and they might get stuck behind freight trains and things like that. It's not uncommon for them to be an hour, maybe even a little bit more than that late. And actually, sometimes that's not a problem because you don't want to arrive somewhere at 5 o'clock in the morning. You'd be quite happy to have an extra hour in bed. What's worth knowing is what to do if you do encounter a delay, which is going to have a knock-on effect into your journey. And there's two things that I would say. The first is don't panic, because frankly, the people working that train will have encountered someone just like you, maybe even that day already, who might be late, might have missed their connection, etc. And they will do their best to accommodate you. If you're traveling between the same railway companies, so if you're going on a connection from a French train to a French train or a German train to a German train, it's a bit easier. But there are some agreements between companies. Not always, though. What I would say is, if you're running really late, get the train manager to sign or note your ticket, or he or she will sometimes have a stamp that they can use as well. And you can take that to the booking office, explain the situation and see what they say. There are some circumstances where if you miss a train and you're changing on to a different company's train, you might have to buy a new ticket, and there's no two ways around that. But actually, in a lot of cases, you will be able to travel on the next one. The other thing to watch out for is there are strikes on trains sometimes. These do happen. There's not much that you can do about them. They are really annoying and they can throw your plans up. But the best thing you can do is just try to keep ahead of them. So if you sign up for email alerts or use the apps of the companies of tickets you book through, they should help you a little bit with that and help you with any rebooking that you can do.
Do you know if travel insurance is helpful in this situation? Like, can they help you get recouped if necessary?
It depends on the kind of delay. It depends on the circumstances. I would generally always be traveling with insurance. I would be very aware of what it actually says. But I think the best thing to do is to try to manage the problem at source and then think about your insurance. Keep all your receipts, see where that leaves you.
What is your best piece of advice for enjoying a European rail experience?
As a general rule, when you're thinking about a European rail experience, it will help you a lot if you are traveling light. You can be on and off trains quickly. You're not stressing about lugging a heavy bag down platforms, and it's not hard to get a big bag on a train, but it's an additional thing to think about. And often you're boarding trains with quite a few other people around. Plus, when you're in a city, sometimes you won't be staying there that night, and there are lockers that you can use at stations in almost everywhere that you'll find yourself. But just being a bit light is a really, really helpful thing.
As someone who has chucked big bags on and off trains, you usually bring more than you need. If you can just leave about half of it at home, it does make things a lot easier. Tom Hall, thank you for joining us, and thank you, our listeners, for being with us. If you're planning a trip, be sure to connect with a AAA travel advisor. Check out AAA.com/travel or visit your local branch. This podcast is a production of Auto Club Enterprises. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a review. I'm Angie Orth. Thank you for traveling with AAA.